I pulled my beat-up Honda into the gravel lot and shut off the engine. The silence that followed was so sudden, so absolute, that it felt like someone had stuffed cotton in my ears. My hand stayed clamped to the steering wheel for a few seconds, knuckles stiff and aching after 8 hours of white-knuckled driving. The last paved road I'd seen was nearly 100 kilometers behind me. Everything after that had been dirt, ruts, washboards, potholes big enough to swallow a Tire Canada's version of a welcome mat for the desperate. And I was absolutely, undeniably desperate. The car gave its familiar metal groan as I pushed the door open. My legs protested when I stood, trembling like they weren't sure they could support the rest of me. A cold wind swept across the clearing, carrying the scent of pine resin and diesel and something else, something faintly metallic, like the air after lightning hits. I looked around. The job posting had said logging camp, but the place in front of me looked more like a temporary military outpost abandoned a decade ago and then resurrected by someone with a blueprint but no budget. Prefab modular units sat scattered around the clearing, like giant shipping containers someone had dropped from a helicopter and then forgotten about. A few had chimneys rattling with the wind. One had a sagging antenna that looked like it hadn't picked up a signal since 2003. Stacks of industrial barrels lined one edge of the camp. None were marked. That was the first thing that should have bothered me. But honestly, everything bothered me by then. The sky above the tree line was dimming, bruised purple with the oncoming evening. Shadows were stretching long across the gravel, creeping toward me like fingers. The place was too quiet. No chainsaws, no generators, no shouting workers, no clanking trucks, not even the distant whine of equipment. A logging camp should have been alive with noise. This one felt like it was holding its breath. I popped open the trunk and dragged out my single duffel bag, half my life in one bag. The other half in a storage unit with a past due notice taped to the door. There was no sign telling me where to go, no map, no welcome brochure. Just the cold wind and the long shadows. Then a door creaked open. I turned. Sharply, a man stepped out of the largest prefab unit, a long structure raised slightly on metal stilts. He walked toward me with slow, measured steps. His boots didn't crunch the gravel. Somehow, that was the second thing that bothered me. He was tall, well over 6 foot, shouldered, with a face carved out of old wood and colder years. His hair was steel gray and cropped close, military style. His eyes were unreadable. "You're the new hire?" he asked. His voice was low, almost lost in the wind. "Yeah," I said. "I emailed 2 days ago. You called me back the same day." A faint smile touched his mouth, an expression practiced to be warm. "Yes, we don't like to waste time here." I swallowed. I didn't get the site details until last night. The email said to arrive before dusk. And you did. He extended a hand. "Wells, supervisor." His handshake was firm but cold, like his fingers had been buried in snow. He looked me up and down quickly, clinically, not evaluating, measuring. "You brought your own vehicle," he observed. "Yeah, good. You may need it." The way he said may made my stomach twist. He gestured for me to follow him. "Let me show you around." As we walked, the camp didn't get any more welcoming. Windows were covered on the inside with heavy blackout curtains or plywood sheets. Most doors had extra locks, industrial ones. Some units had metal panels welded over vents. There were floodlights mounted on tall poles around the perimeter. But they all pointed outward, toward the dark forest. Not inward, toward the camp. The third thing that bothered me. "This seems pretty secure," I said. Wells didn't look at me. "We take precautions." "Against what?" He stopped walking. Not abruptly, just suddenly enough that I nearly bumped into him. He turned his head slightly, as if listening to something in the trees. The wind hissed through the pines. A distant metallic creak echoed across the clearing. Something clanged. Something else thud. D-E-D-dud. Finally he said, "Wildlife." His tone made the word sound like a lie told out of necessity. He resumed walking. I hurried to keep up. We stopped at a small unit with a metal door and a keypad lock. Wells punched in a code so fast, I didn't catch any of it. "This will be your quarters," he said. "Room, heat, food. You start orientation tomorrow." "Orientation for what exactly?" He opened the door, but didn't step inside. "You'll learn." I'd stepped in. The interior surprised me. It was clean, warm, a single bed with stiff sheets, a small table, a heater humming in the corner, a narrow window sealed with reinforced shutters bolted shut from the inside. Not a single clock on the walls, not a single mirror. Wells stood in the doorway watching me, not the room. Me. "You'll want to stay inside tonight," he said. "Because of the wildlife." He paused again. "Because it's safer." Safer than what? This time he didn't answer. He just nodded once and pulled the door shut. The snap of the deadbolt locking from the outside echoed through the tiny room. I stood still for a long moment, listening. The heater hummed. Something creaked in the walls. Outside, the wind whistled through the clearing. And beneath that all, most too faint to identify, came a sound that made my skin prickle along. Low howl that rose into a warbling, unnatural pitch. I froze. That wasn't wildlife. That wasn't anything I'd ever heard in my life. And it was close. Too close. My breath hitched. My job posting suddenly felt like a trap. My hasty application, like a mistake. My new supervisor, like a liar. And the camp, this quiet, silent, oversecured camp, felt less like a workplace and more like a bunker. Something moved outside my window. Something heavy enough to crunch the gravel once, twice, then stopped directly in front of my unit. I held my breath. The heater clicked off. The camp fell dead silent. Then, the claws scraped slowly down the metal door, high to low. Like whatever was outside wasn't trying to break in, it was testing, feeling the material, learning its boundaries, testing mine. The sound was soft, almost delicate, but the weight behind it was unmistakable. Something big, something heavy, something confident enough to take its time. My breath locked in my throat. The heater stayed silent. The wind had died. Even the trees seemed to be holding still, like the whole forest was listening. Another scrape, then a low huff, warm, moist air exhaling against the door. I could almost feel the condensation forming on the other side of the metal. I took one silent step back, then another. My heel bumped into the edge of the bed. The thing outside shifted its weight. Gravel formed tiny avalanches under its feet, too loud, too crisp, too close. I could hear the crushing pressure of something large, repositioning itself. Then, silence. Not the natural kind. Not the absence of noise. A listening silence. It was listening for me. I clamped a hand over my mouth. The doorknob twitched, once, twice. A soft metallic rattle that pulsed straight into my bones. It couldn't open it, not from the outside. I knew that. Wells had locked it from the outside with a heavy deadbolt. Even a bear couldn't twist a doorknob. Board whatever was out there. Still tried. The knob turned harder. Metal groaned. The hinges trembled. I squeezed my eyes shut and willed myself to disappear. To vanish into the darkroom. To slow my breathing. To go still. Finally, after an eternity, the pressure on the doorknob eased. The thing outside huffed again. A sharp, irritated sound, almost human in its frustration. Then the gravel crunched as it walked away. One step, two, three, then it stopped again. Near the corner of the unit, a scraping sound followed, this time on the wall and higher than before. Way higher, a slow, deliberate drag of claws against metal siding near the roofline. Whatever it was, it could reach 8 feet high, maybe more. The claws finally fell silent. Then came the worst part of all. A voice, not speaking, not forming words, but mimicking something it had heard before. A low, broken whisper. Healed. My stomach turned to ice. It came again, warbling, unnatural. Healed me. The sound stuttered like something trying to imitate a recording warped by heat. I backed into the bed so hard it squealed against the floor. The voice fell silent instantly. Then, running fast toward my door, I threw myself onto the floor, curling tight behind the bed just as something slammed into the door with enough force to shake dust from the ceiling. The entire unit shuddered. The deadbolt held, but the impact was so strong the metal dented inward with a sickening crunch. Another slam, then another. The thing snarled, a deep, vibrating growl that rattled the window shutters. A fourth blow, then nothing. The silence this time was absolute. I stayed curled on the floor for minutes, maybe longer. Time dissolved into fear. Finally, a voice called out from the clearing. Deep, authoritative, human, double quotes, stand down. Wells' his tone cracked through the night like a rifle shot. The thing outside my door responded with a guttural, angry moan, almost disappointed. Back into the tree line. Wells barked. NOW. I didn't hear movement. I didn't have to. The cold dread crawling slowly up my spine told me the thing was still out there. Still watching. Still deciding. Then a rapid series of chirps erupted from somewhere high above like an instrument being activated. A floodlight buzzed, then clicked on with a harsh electric snap. bathing the clearing in white light. The creature shrieked. Not an animal sound. Not human. A ripping, tearing cry like metal scraping against bone. Then it ran, thundering across the gravel and crashing into the trees with a speed that didn't seem possible for something that size. Branches snapped. Underbrush exploded then. Silence swallowed everything. A few seconds later, knuckles rapped against my door. Open up, Wells. I didn't move. Open the door, he repeated. It's gone. The hell it is, I whispered. It's gone for now. The way he said for now made my stomach twist again. My legs shook as I stood. I approached the door slowly, half expecting it to slam inward at the last moment. But nothing happened. No claw. No voice. No impact. I unlocked the deadbolt with trembling hands. When I cracked the door open, Wells was standing there with a rifle slung across his chest, a matte black thing with a scope, grip, and attachments I didn't recognize. He didn't look scared, he looked annoyed. Good, he said, pushing the door wider. You're alive. What the hell was that? He didn't answer. He stepped inside, checked the dented door, then crossed to the window and examined the shutters. Finally, he turned to me. You need to listen carefully, he said. You are not in a logging camp. Yeah, I breathed. I got that. He continued like I hadn't spoken. It's a research site. A containment facility. The job posting was real, but the job description wasn't. You were hired because you're physically capable and available. Available meaning desperate. Yes. What the hell are you containing out here? Wells looked at the dent in the metal door like it personally offended him. Then he said, Not what? Who? My blood went cold before I could respond. Something crackled over a static-filled radio clipped to his vest. Unit 1-2. Supervisor motion sensors triggered on North Sector. Multiple signatures. Fast-moving. Wells exhaled sharply. There. Early tonight, he muttered. He turned to me. Get your boots on. You're coming with me? What? No. No way. I'm not going out there. You don't have a choice, he said. This camp won't survive the night short-handed. You expect me to fight that thing? I don't even know what it is. Wells walked toward the door, rifle in hand. Every movement precise and steady. He paused in the doorway. It's not just one, he said. Then he added almost gently, and you'll learn what they are before sunrise. Assuming you make it that long. Wells didn't wait for me to decide. He stepped into the night like a man walking into an office lobby, not into a forest where something had just tried to tear my door off its hinges. I froze in the doorway, torn between two equally bad choices. Stay inside the thin-walled metal box where something had already found me, or follow the man, who apparently thought chasing monsters was a normal night shift. A second howl split the tree line. Not the long, mournful sound from before this was sharper, closer, answered by two more from different directions. Wells didn't flinch. Move, he said without turning. They're circling. I grabbed my boots, shoved them on without bothering to tie the laces properly, and stepped outside. The cold hit me like a slap. The clearing was drowned in harsh white light from the pole-mounted floodlamps. Their beams cut through the dusk, but only reached the first few rows of trees. Beyond that was a wall of pure black. Wells started walking, fast across the gravel, and I jogged to catch up. Those things, how many are there? I asked. He didn't look at me. Tonight, more than we'd like. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're going to get right now. Another scream, this one higher, like metal being torn apart, echoed from deeper in the woods. I spun toward the sound. Wells kept going. Don't look at them, he said. That's mistake one. Mistake one. How many mistakes are there? Depends how long you live. We reached the main operations building, the long prefab structure he'd come from earlier. Wells keyed in a code and shoved the door open. A blast of warm, generator-heated air hit us. Inside was a long central corridor lit with emergency red strips along the floor. Rooms branched off in both directions. I glimpsed bunk beds, supply racks, fuel canisters, stacked crates labeled with numbers instead of words, and people, 3 of them sitting at a round metal table, staring at Wells like he'd brought in a wild animal instead of a new worker. One was a woman in her 40s, hair tied back severely. Her expression, the brittle kind of tired you usually only see in ER doctors or hostage negotiators. Another was a young indigenous man with braids down his back, sharpening a hunting knife with rhythmic, deliberate strokes. His eyes flicked to me only once, and that was enough to make my skin crawl. His gaze held no confusion, No curiosity, only assessment. The third was an older man hunched over a crate, tightening the bolts on what looked disturbingly like bear traps modified with metal spikes. Wells gestured at them. "Team, this is the new recruit," the older man snorted already. It's only been a week since Wells cut him off with a look. "We're all short-handed. What exactly is he supposed to do?" the woman asked. "Not die," Wells said. "That would be an excellent start." Swallowed. "Someone going to tell me what's happening out there?" The young man, he couldn't have been older than 25, finally spoke. His voice was soft, calm, like he was explaining rain patterns instead of monsters. "They're not supposed to be this active before moonrise. Maybe they're adapting," the woman said quietly. "They always adapt." "Enough," Wells barked. He turned to me. "You wanted the job. This is the job." "This is insane," I said. "I thought this was a forestry position. You applied to a job with high pay, no experience required, immediate hiring, and no company name. That didn't strike you as suspicious?" "Of course it did. But I needed the money." "Exactly," he said. "That's why you're here." I stared at him. "To do what?" The older man finished tightening the bolts and stood. His eyes were pale, washed-out blue, and unfriendly. "To keep the things in the forest from eating us," he said. Wells shot him a warning glare. "Not helpful, Murphy." "I'm not being helpful," Murphy said. "I'm being honest." The woman stood up. "We need to reinforce the north perimeter," she said to Wells. "If the sensors tripped early, they might try the fence again." "We'll go," Wells said. "Arm up." The young man slid his knife into a sheath and grabbed a bow, an actual bow, handmade, dark wood, the string taut and polished. A quiver full of obsidian-tipped arrows hung at his side. Murphy pulled on a heavy vest and grabbed a shotgun with custom rounds. The woman picked up a long metal staff with a clamp-like device at the end. Wells shoved a vest into my chest. "Put this on." "What for?" I asked. "So we have something to bury if things go wrong," Murphy muttered. Wells ignored him. "You're with me?" I stared at him. "Outside? Again?" No. I barely made it through the last 5 minutes." "You won't be alone," he said. "That doesn't make me feel better." "It should," Wells said calmly, "because alone is how they prefer their prey." My mouth went dry. Another howl ripped through the forest, this one so close the floodlights flickered. The young man's head snapped toward the tree line. "They're shifting," he said. Wells grabbed his rifle. "Move out!" He stepped toward the door, and then something hit the roof of the building hard. Dust rained from the ceiling. The lights flickered again. Something scraped across the metal exterior, heavy claws, dragging, testing, probing. The woman whispered, "Shit, they never come this close to the buildings." The young man knocked an arrow. Murphy reached for his shotgun. Wells turned to me, slowly, his eyes colder than the wind outside. "You want to know what we're up against?" I nodded. He pointed upward, as something massive prowled across the roof, growling low enough to vibrate the walls. "Then congratulations," Wells said. "It just found you first."